Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone tonight. And thanks for coming out on such a cold Melbourne winter night. It's can be a bit difficult sometimes when it's weather like this. I guess the first thing I'd like to do is just share a couple of experiences I had, not as a mentor but as a mentee. One was around the early 2000s, and I'd just finished my undergraduate degree. And through a close friend of mine, his father was an AFL coach, and I'd done an exercise science degree and was heading in the path of working with elite athletes and high performance athletes, and spent some time with him. And it was probably the best 2 hours of my life that I spent with this person, and it literally changed the direction I was heading in and had a significant impact. And from that time, I mean, I've had different spend time with the same person off and on, but that first meeting really galvanised some thoughts that I had. He was able to just share with me some experiences he had, but also talk about some things that he'd seen in the industry, and it was in the AFL industry that I was quite interested in moving into. So it was just a fantastic experience. The inverse of that was I was awarded a place in a mentorship program which was running for 8 months, and I had been appointed someone to be my mentor. I was the mentee, and the first time I met with the person, we met at a cafe, sat down, had a coffee, and spent probably an hour and a half together. And after the first 30 or 40 minutes, we're just having conversation about a whole range of things, and the person said to me, "Oh, you probably should be my mentor." And unfortunately I felt the same way. So that actually didn't go any further from there. And I guess I'll talk about that experience and bring it in throughout the presentation. And part of that not progressing was, on me as much as it was on that person, but it just was one of those ones that just didn't work from the outset. And it was kind of, I'll touch on some things around expectations, around understanding, I guess the relative experience of people and how that impacts the relationship that you have. What's happened there? Beautiful. Okay, so I just want to cover off on a few sort of key areas as we go through the presentation. So understanding mentor, what it is, who it is, what it's about, those types of things. The presentation will be about 35 minutes, and we'll have a little break after about 15 or so minutes, just so that you can kind of stretch your feet and catch your breath again, because these things can drag a bit. Talk a little bit about the mentoring process, so some of the things that you can do, and also some tools that you might be able to use, and also skills required. So when we talk about mentoring, it's an interesting thing that everyone has different ideas about what it is. Some people say it's coaching, some people say it's not. Some people say that it's just giving advice, or it's helping people to guide them. They've already got the ideas in their head. And for me, it's all of these things. I think the interesting thing about being a mentor is that you obviously go into it as the mentor with a predisposition to sharing knowledge. You're interested in helping people, you're interested in giving back from what you've gained. So there's all of these things, and I think that the great thing about it is it ends up being a different thing for everybody. And you've got to find your strength. You've got to find the thing that works well for you, and then see how that fits with the person you're working with. So any of the labels we want to give it and how we talk about it and whatever it is, for me it's around that giving back, that sharing, that helping someone to develop, but also understanding that what are you getting out of it as a mentor. So you need to be really clear with yourself going into it, thinking, what is the thing that I want to get out of it? What do I want to develop? Do I want to get some skills? Do I want to just feel good because I'm helping somebody? Do I want to maybe find someone who might be able to work in the industry I'm in, that might be able to work in the company, whatever it is. But be really clear with yourself on what it is you want to get out of it and have that understanding. And you can share that with the people you're working with, because it's that having that open and honest conversations is really an important factor as well. When we talk about where we mentor, I think is a really important thing. So we know, looking back 30, 40 years, office blocks, the way they were set up, the way offices were set up, the way people sat in their own little areas, that's all changed, because we understand now the environmental impact on communication, on how we deal with people, on how we learn, how we grow, how we develop. So the environment that you're working in is really important. And I use this picture, it was actually a coach of mine. I just finished a half Ironman triathlon, and the person that was coaching me had done, a huge amount of races. He'd done Hawaii 9 times. He was an amazing athlete, an amazing coach. And I just want to give an example of, this looks like we're the only 2 people on the planet. And that's actually what it felt like. But there was another 500 people on the other side of the grass right next to us. But Craig was a really, a great person and a really understanding and empathetic person. And the thing I would like to point out in the photo is the fact that he's crouched down to talk to me. So someone who's in a wheelchair, you're often in situations where people are talking and it's quite hard to communicate. So if there's not a seat, and people just don't know, but without ever having to tell this person, he was so good at what he did, he would just get down and chat to me face to face. And really had an amazing impact on me as an athlete. And also, just the way that he communicated, it really drove home the points that we were talking about. So I hadn't had a great race on this day, and I had a big event coming up later in the year, and he just kind of sat me down and said, look, this is what we're doing, this is where you're at, as far as this process is going, this is what we're aiming at. And it really was a great experience for me, and it's a photo that I look at regularly because it takes me back to that spot. And that's the kind of impact that we can have on people. And I think that it's really important to understand that as a factor, and I'll get onto that a bit more, but just thinking about the impact that you can have on the people you're speaking to and how that lasts and how that can help them with their decisions, with a whole range of things. And they may look back 10 years later and look at it fondly and still feel that. And I've had that experience myself. So I coach football, and I've coached football for a long time. I was a rugby league player, so I grew up in Queensland, played league and union when I was doing martial arts, and I moved to Victoria and ended up involved with AFL. And the thing that I love the ability to teach people. My background, as I said, is exercise science, so strength and conditioning, just physical preparation for games. But the part that I love about coaching is the impact that I'm able to have on the young men that I coach. Most of them are aged between 18 and 25, is sort of that, around that range, most of the people I work with. And I know that the things that I do and the things that I say have a lasting impact on them. And I've had people come up to me years after I've coached them and say to me, Pato, when you said that thing to me at that point in time, it just changed my perspective. It gave me a different view. And I know that that happens. And I sometimes will do that deliberately. I will use terms, I'll use whatever it is, because I know at that point in time, it's going to flick a little switch and it's going to do something. And it's part of that interaction that I really love as far as coaching. We've got to understand the things we say and the impact they can have. So we have to understand that when we say to someone to do something, they might just take us literally at our word and go and do it. And there becomes a kind of relative power base. So the example I like to think about is, if a CEO says something to you as a staff member, it's a different weight on that conversation than the exact same thing said by someone else, by a peer. And it can be the same words, same conversation, but the weight carried by someone because of the relative power, that's just the nature of it. So when we're mentoring people, we need to understand that when we say things to them, if we've got 30 years experience, 40 years experience in an industry that they want to get into and they love, it's going to carry weight. So we need to really think about what we say and how we say it and how we direct people. And the inverse of that is a great opportunity. You might get someone to dress like Batman at some point in time. Oh, sorry, I've just done that again. So when we talk about mentoring, it's kind of the question is what's in and what's out. And I guess, again, it goes back to that thing about what are your strengths? What are the things that you're good at? We look across the list and you might think there's 2 or 3 things there that, yeah, I'm really good at that. I'm not sure I'm so good at that. So you might want to work on the things that you're not as good at, or you might want to play to your strengths. And just know that I'm really good at this, this and this. And you tell your mentee, look, if you need some help in that area, it's not necessarily my strength, but I know someone that can help you. Or if you read this book, or you look at this article, or whatever it is, it can be quite helpful for people. So just understanding that you're going to be good at some things and not as good at other things, and being really open about it. We're not expected to know everything. We don't go into these meetings with people and they're going to ask us something, we have to have all the answers. So it's really, one of those things that the things that you're good at, just be aware of those and work to them. I put a thing on the start of the slide saying mentoring 2.0 because the world's changed now. The days of the face-to-face meeting are less and less, aren't they? We have remote working locations, we have people, using social media all the time. There's all sorts of connections and interactions that happen. And when you're working with people, again, I think as a mentor, you need to understand, what am I good at? Am I good at phone conversations? Or am I someone that needs to be there to read the facial cues, the movement that someone's got? Which one am I going to be better at? And if I know I'm not great on the phone. I don't like talking on the phone. I really like talking to people face to face. Because I can read them, I can talk to them, you can get that interaction happening really well. So for me to have those types of conversations on the phone is not going to be anywhere near as effective as it is face to face. So I would always try and make the situation so that I'm having the conversations face to face. So again, it's just understanding your skill set, what are you good at, and just being clear with the people. If it works out that you can't do it that way, it might be that you just say, well, look, we're going to do one of the three face-to-face, the other two will be on the phone. I'm better face-to-face, so if you're unsure about something, ask questions. And just making sure that dialogue's really open, that you've said to them, look, I'm much better doing it this way. I understand we need to do it that way. Let's manage it as we go along and understand it. And I was talking to Tessa earlier about the idea of that, the managing, and if you find yourself in a situation where I was in, where I had one meeting with a person and I didn't think it was working, feel free to come back as quickly as possible and ask for some assistance, whether that needs to be changed, whatever it is, because there are human dynamics. Everyone doesn't get along with everybody. And you don't need to just push through and persist. If you feel like it's just not a great fit for some reason, then have a conversation about it. Because the last thing we want is for you to have a bad experience and for the student to have a bad experience, because that's not beneficial to anybody. So we're better off looking at it, seeing if we can do something about it, and then moving from there. But just again, being aware of your strengths. I think that the idea around sharing information, so if you have someone that you're mentoring in an area and you see a bit of information, news article, journal article, whatever it is, flick it through to them. People love that, because they know that you're thinking about them when you're not there. And I think that's that preparation, that being, as much as possible present with the person. Don't just go into the meeting that you have organised with them without any preparation, without thinking about what you're going to say, what you're going to do. And if you can touch base every now and then by just flicking across articles, or I saw this story in The Age, send them a message, you might want to have a look at it, those sorts of things. Talk about the people in the industry or in life that you think are great thought leaders. And there's plenty of them around. There's a guy that I really like who's written a book called Starts With Why. His name's Simon Sinek. People may have seen him. He's done TED Talks. He's done a whole range of things. And it's a book that I end up having 5 copies of on my shelf at all the time, because I just flick them and give them to people. So if I meet someone I think, oh, you'd be quite interested in that, I'll give them a copy of it. It's like $12 or $15 or whatever it is. And it's one of those things that I find his approach and the way he does things really, it works for me. And if I find someone who I kind of think is on the same page, I'll give them a copy of it. So just thinking about those sorts of things. Who can you influence your mentee by talking about people that you think are good in the industry? And they might just be industry dynamos and not necessarily outside that, but they might be someone who's not even in that industry, like a Simon Sinek, or like Malcolm Gladwell, Seth Godin, these guys who are kind of seen as these business thought leaders. I'm always pushing their stuff out to people because I really like the way they think and the way they go about things. And yeah, I guess it reflects sort of my approach as well to some degree. I think that, so the thing for me that's a really critical part about this, about relationships, and for me, about coaching, mentoring, these types of relationships, is that understanding that power dynamic. So finding out about the person you're working with, and really doing a bit of an analysis in your head, thinking, okay, so they've just graduated, they're doing a master's, PhD, whatever it is, what level they're at, what their experience is compared to you, and trying to get a bit of a perception yourself about where they're going to see you. Because again, the words that you say are going to carry with them. They're going to listen to you because you're the specialist, you're the guru in their eyes. So just being aware of that responsibility, and I think it's a great responsibility to have, because it can be so powerful in helping people. It can be so powerful in helping direct young people's lives, and I'm sure this is why everyone's here, and it's certainly the reason that I work in the area I work in. I haven't worked in fundraising before. I've been involved in sport a lot and business management, and the reason that I was interested in this role was because it ties in with some things that I'm really passionate about, and that's for me to be able to help donors to help young people through scholarships or through research within the university or whatever it is. For me, it's a powerful thing, and I work in sport and in an area uni-wide, so across the university. And so the sport part, I get to help athletes. We've got some high-performance athletes at the university that we help with scholarships. We help them with their strength and conditioning, a whole range of things. And so for me, that is a really great thing to be able to do, is to be able to assist those young people to reach their goals. I know that probably people have heard about storytelling, and it's become a bit of one of those things. It's the golden thing at the moment. But the power of stories to explain a situation, to help people to realise where they might want to head to unlock things within themselves, is an amazing thing. And I remember when I did my master's, we did our master's thesis on storytelling, and I heard this one from a person once, and it talked about the difference between facts and stories. And it said, the fact is, the Queen died, the King died. The story is, the Queen died and the King died of a broken heart. And even little things like that change the whole context of what you're talking about. So when you're thinking about stories that you might be able to use with people, do a bit of kind of thought around, okay, what's the sort of rich tapestry of this? Rather than just the facts, so well, if you do this, this, and this, it equals that. How do I get that to engage somebody? Because we know that as humans, we remember stories more than we remember facts. If you tell someone a story with 10 facts in it, they're more likely to remember that than if you just give them the facts. So if you think about using it as a tool in your communication, experiences you've had, and rather than just say, oh, well, I had this job once and it wasn't very much fun, blah, 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 blah. Get into the rich deepness of, why wasn't it? What was it about it? What was the feeling you had? What was the sense that it gave you? What were all those things that played into that being a certain way? And if you think about being able to use those as tools, they'll be really impactful. They'll be really strong to work with people. And also, for me, the who's learning part is important. So I think that you will learn as much as the mentees learn, and that's the great part about it. You'll end up developing a whole range of pieces of knowledge about this person, but also maybe about their lives, their cultures, a whole heap of things that you can learn from them as much as they learn from you. So while you're bringing a level of expertise and a level of experience, I think it's great to have that other set of eyes and look at it through the young person that you're dealing with. Where are they going on their career? It can be really reinvigorating. All right, so we're just going to have a quick break. And if you want to just stand up, you can stretch your legs. We're just going to have about 90 seconds and just ask someone who's around you, if you haven't met them before, about their fresh eyes and what they're seeing and what they're thinking. All right, 90 seconds rest. Okay, great. So we can continue those conversations once we're finished. I'll hang around for a bit at the end as well. And I've only got a few more slides to go, and then we'll have some questions. Was there anything burning that came out of that someone thought, from what we've spoken about so far? Anything that popped up that anyone wanted to mention? No? Okay. All right. So when we talk about mentoring, as with a lot of things, the real key is that art versus science. So we understand that there's, we can have a process, and it's interesting, I once worked with a guy who used to say, all models are wrong, some are useful. So there's going to be 1,000 different ideas about how to do this thing or that thing, and if you jump online, look at mentoring, there's the 5-step, the 10-step, the 12-step, the 36-step process, all of those things. And you just pick out, again, what works for you and what is useful. But the art of it, as with coaching, and I certainly find that, it's a really critical thing for good coaches, and good business managers have a lot in common, because that ability to understand the individual and get the most out of them for the collective good is what coaching is all about. And certainly with sports teams, and if you're talking about, for those who are interested in sports teams like AFL, where you've got 22 players, or soccer where you have 11 on the ground and you've 4 or 5 reserves, groups of people which are large, and trying to get that dynamic to work well together, that art side of it becomes really important. And the coach that I spoke about earlier on, who had done some mentoring with me, was one of the first coaches in the AFL to really highlight that art part of the coaching. Before, he had played in the 60s and was a coach through 70s, 80s, early 90s, and was really of the kind of era of the command and control, rah, 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 yell till your horse kind of approach. And as he progressed through his career, and he was a PE, a physical education lecturer as a background, he developed, as sort of things changed, he started to understand that you needed to get buy-in from people. And he was one of the first AFL coaches to get his team and have a leadership group that basically said the way that it was going to operate, what the culture was going to be, a whole range of things. And it worked really effectively. And it's something now in professional sport that just happens. Everyone talks about, the brand we play and the culture we have in our team and all these types of things. They've just become second nature. But there was a time when it was the person out the front who was doing the yelling. And we understand that as we change, and we hear a lot about millennials, it's a different dynamic again. People are changing, and you've got to understand how to manage these people, and that's the science. The art. It's knowing, you have a process and this is how we're going to do, but where are the inputs? So, given that all models are wrong and some are useful, this is just a model that can be used. So identifying a context, making a statement, invite a reaction, lead a reflection, and create an awareness. So just as a process of going through a specific area, so someone might talk to you about where they want to go in their career, and you can give an example, try and elicit a reaction, see what they're thinking, do all of those things. This is the science, but the art is knowing where the inputs are. Where do you push, where do you prod, where do you give advice, where do you tell, where do you let the person get their own awareness? The idea of everyone has the answers in their own head, they've just got to work out what they are. Sometimes they need different prodding to help to do that. And that is the real art of being a great mentor. And it's something that no one's expecting, if you haven't done it before, for people just to be able to do it. So don't put, a large amount of pressure on yourself that you're going to be the perfect mentor, and whoever you mentor is going to go on to be the CEO of Fortune 500. You'll learn as you go, and you'll get better at it, and you'll make mistakes, and you can talk to it about the person, and then the next time you do it, you'll be better again. And the next time you do it, it's like anything. The next slide, so when we talk about models, this one is just like a return on investment. And I like this one because it's kind of like what happens with human performance. We put a load on something, there's a fatigue, and then we compensate coming up into this curve. And for me, that understanding of, so we give someone some information and they've got to deal with it, there's going to be a lag while they kind of process it, understand it, and it takes a while to get that rising up the other side, to start to get the understanding, to start to see something. And then what happens is, and what happens with physical conditioning, the example I always use, which is a simple one, if you go out and spend an hour digging in the backyard, you do that every day for 3 weeks, you're going to end up with calluses. Your body does that because it's laying down a protective mechanism, so it responds. So it does that with everything, with your physical conditioning, with your muscle, whatever it is. Put a load on it, your body goes into fatigue, compensates, you get fitter, stronger, faster, whatever it is. That's how that works. And I think it's the same with your brain. You put a load on it, sometimes it's like, whoa, I've got to process this, I've got to understand it, and then we start to have an awareness where it is, yeah, that's right. So we want to hit it again, so that we keep getting those developments, that we don't just, start to drop off or plateau. So just that idea of, continually growing, continually developing, but understanding that there is a return on mentoring. There's an ROI on it. If you're doing it within a workplace, and for you as mentors, you want to think about what is it that you want the person, for you to think, well, I've been successful. So what are those measures of success? And sometimes after the fact, and I certainly see this with athletes that I've worked with, after the fact you can always, hindsight's fabulous. Yeah, well this happened, that happened, blah, blah, blah. Before you have an event, before you do something, write down 3 things that you want to achieve. Because sometimes we're a bit hard on ourselves. So before you go into a meeting, what do I want to get out of the meeting? What would I like to see happen? Write down 3 things, see what happens afterwards. Test it against what you thought beforehand, rather than that hindsight being, oh yeah, it kind of worked well, or I thought that would happen. Like, measure it so you can go, these 3 things, did we achieve them, did we not? If we did, if we didn't, why not? It's a really simple tool to use for yourself. And after a while, it becomes second nature. You can do it without having to write it down every time. But just those types of processes can be quite helpful. So I thought this is a nice one to end on. Everyone obviously is here because they want to help out, and they understand that doing something for someone else is always much better, it's faster. I mean, some of us might be sitting there thinking, if I had someone helping me when I was 20, 25, whatever it is, where would I be now? These types of things. We've all had those experiences. So thank you for coming along. We're going to have, I've got my email address there in case anyone, and I don't mind if people wanted to contact me to ask questions or talk about things that I've done or whatever it is. I will be here and we're going to have refreshments. But I thought if we wanted to have some questions for maybe 3 or 4 minutes before we go out, I'm quite happy to do that. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, things that you've seen that have worked, haven't worked. Yeah. Look, I would think the ones, some will and some won't, and some will be, and the ones that do, it's like, I remember when I was having a child, there was a book that my partner and I were looking at, and it said, if you're reading this book, you probably don't need to read this book, because you're the people that are already thinking about what you should be doing, shouldn't be doing, and that sort of thing. So the ones that are coming with the questions are going to be probably easier to mentor and manage, and if people don't and you think they should, just say. Yeah, when you come along, be prepared. If I'm going to put in time to prepare to mentor you, you've got to put in time when you come, that it's not just we're making it up as we go along. And also setting goals for them so that next time we come back, so what did you get done? Like anything, it's like if you're managing staff, KPIs, whatever, however you want to frame them, that sort of process would be helpful, I reckon. Yeah. Roving mic.
If it works.
Yeah.
Hi Rob. My question is, what will happen after this session? So how are we going to be assigned with a mentee?
All right. That's outside my scope of knowledge.
So her question, I don't know if everyone was able to hear that, the question was, how will you be matched to a mentee? So all of you have filled in your online profiles, and so have our students. And together with Deirdre, Stacey, quite a few of our other colleagues, we have actually spent the last few weeks matching most of you already. The matches will be published on the 26th of July. And what has happened in that process is we've actually gone into each profile, read all your statements, match. The system tries to match it for you, but we go in and check that the matches are the best fit. On occasion, we find that it isn't. The system hasn't picked the best one up, and so we go in and we amend those matches. And it's normally based on your statement. So what you are looking for out of the mentoring experience, what the student is looking for out of the mentoring experience. We've tried our very best to match across all the different fields and preferences that everyone's interested. Sometimes we can't match 100% of all the fields, but I think we've done a fairly good job. If we haven't, as Rob mentioned earlier, if you feel that at any point or at the start and the middle that something's not quite right, it doesn't feel right, reach out, contact us. You have our email address, which is system-mentoring@email.edu.au. Reach out to us and let us know what's happened, and we'll try our best to fix it. Does that answer your question? And if you've got questions about mentees as well, Deirdre's here as well, so feel free to ask. And between the three of us, we should be able to answer most of your questions tonight.
I'll be answering less of them.
And this is working now, so yeah. Do we have any more questions?
Any other questions? Yeah.
Rob, what advice would you give to a mentor if they're paired with a mentee who may be somewhat unenthusiastic about the process?
I guess the first thing you'd be doing is asking them what it is they want out of it, why they did it, trying to kind of find their key motivations, as you would with any staff member. Sometimes it might be worth just kind of finding out where they're at in their headspace as far as their study, whatever they're doing, because it could just be a bad week. We all have those, right? So sometimes it might just be that day they're flat because something's happened externally, and it might be just having a chat with, opening yourself up just to have a general conversation about life. Might just unlock a whole heap of things. So it's kind of just working those triggers. It doesn't always have to be, so we've got to get through these 4-step process so that we move them from this stage to this stage of the mentorship. Sometimes it's just having someone to talk to, and that might be enough to kind of unlock where they're at. And I guess if you tried that and didn't feel like it was going, and then there was a second session and you felt they were doing that again, then come back to us and we can try and help out, because we can always talk to the person and kind of find out what's going on. Life's always interesting like that. You don't know what's happening in people's lives, and you might think, oh, well, this person's no good, blah, 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 blah. But their dog might have struck on it, or whatever it is. We kind of don't know sometimes what's happening in the background, so you want to just give them the benefit of the doubt and try and it's a great skill to be able to learn to then go, okay, so plan A was to go through this process and be the mentor, but that's not working today. So what's my plan B? What's my plan C? How do I manage those different opportunities?
You mentioned earlier that there were more mentors than there are mentees this year. So I just wanted to ask, if you aren't assigned a mentee, what is the expected involvement from you as a mentor for the remainder of the program?
That's a really good question. There aren't too many, and we expect that based on previous experiences that because some mentors do end up dropping off anyway, that we should be able to match everyone. But in the instance that we haven't been able to find you a good match, we also aren't going to match you with just any other student without prior permission. If you haven't been matched with somebody, you're still welcome to stay in touch with us. We've got the Science Alumni LinkedIn group. Stacey will be able to talk to you about how they're supporting the engineering alumni as well. There is another program called Ask Alumni, which is a digital, it's a matching process. So any number of students can ask any number of mentors online questions around student experiences, work-life experiences, all of that kind of the general mentoring process still takes place, but it's online. So I, say to everyone here who, whether or not you're a part of the STEM mentoring program, you're also welcome to join the Ask Alumni program. There are many mentoring programs that are being run here at the University of Melbourne. So mentoring.unimel.edu.au shows you the whole suite of activities that we have available. So hopefully we'll be able to find you a match, but if we can't, there's something else for you.
One more question if we've got time.
Yeah.
My question is for Rob. I know you're short in time and it may take some more time. You mentioned sometimes you give your mentees some new insight and you know that it changes their life or they give them new directions. Can you give us a short example?
Yeah, sure. Predominantly, it has happened with some of the athletes that I've been coaching. So I'll give you an example of, I was working at a football club and we had a whole bunch of young players and we had a guy who was an older player in the last couple of years of his career, and he came to our club as a kind of newer recruit. And I remember he'd been playing maybe 3 or 4 games and he wasn't happy with how he was performing. Wasn't happy with what he was doing on the ground. And he came off the ground at one stage during a game and was, you know, grumpy. And I said, look, Luke, this is not about you. I said, what you're here for is to develop these young men and help them to be better. So your behaviour needs to be doing that. And he came to me 5 years later and told me that that had changed his whole perspective on that year, but also the way that he thought about what it was he was there to do, and helped him to kind of, you know, take his sort of vision of himself a bit and help the others. And by doing that, he became better. Yeah. So it was a really nice one for me too, afterwards, for him to come and say that. Oh, I thought, oh, good, that worked. All right, so we'll have the refreshments. This book is by Tim Ferriss, Tribe of Mentors. So it's actually quite a, if someone wants to have a look at some stories, it's got 100 mentors. He sent the same questions to 11 questions and he asked them to pick out their top 4 or 5. And it's got responses from a whole range of people, from athletes to business people to entrepreneurs, all sorts of things. And it's not a bad book, but as with anything, there'll be tons of different resources out there for you if you want to look into it. So thanks again for your time. Certainly from STEM, we really appreciate both coming out tonight and offering your service. You know, it's a wonderful thing to do. We continue to develop great young people in this city, in this country, and that's what it's about. So thank you very much.